Hey folks, welcome to the next discussion group on pathways to pain relief. It isn't just on pathways to pain relief. We're going to be covering a whole bunch of topics and basically whatever comes up. We're trying out, experimenting a new idea of a weekly TMS chat group. And to kind of facilitate some new ideas, we'll go through some books, read through them chapter by chapter. This week, we're taking, or some of us have taken a look at Pathways to Pain Relief, a new book by Sommer and Eric Sherman, two of Dr. Sarno's most trusted psychoanalysts. Between them, they have about 60 years of experience treating Dr. Sarno's patients. So I think it's a terrific opportunity to talk about this book. Can everyone hear me okay? Anyone can't hear me?
Fine.
Okay, thank you. But we really, the book is just a way to start to add some new ideas to the discussion. As you know, we're going to be recording this to make it available for people who read the book later on. We'll put it up in our media center. We could distribute it elsewhere as well. For the chat room, I'm encouraging everyone to go to www.tmswiki.org/chat, and I encourage people to, if you want to say something for whatever reason, feel free to type it in there or just jump in and chat. We have a fairly small group today. Other people may join us later on, but it's definitely a great opportunity to kind of share your experience. I think this book is an amazing and awesome book. We're kind of going through the boring and slow part of it right now. I think that it starts off with some introductory material, and then the real heart of it later on is the case histories. But I think that there's some pretty cool stuff in here anyway that we will talk about a little bit. But what I think will make it more interesting is getting a chance to hear people's stories. Okay. So, hey, it looks like Morcom is here. That's good to know. So for this week, we looked through, or at least some of us have looked through. I know Bruce has. I know I have. I don't know if anybody else has. But the foreword written by Dr. Sarno, and also the first couple chapters by Dr. Anderson. And I guess the first thing which I thought was the most interesting was a story. This is Dr. Anderson's introductory quote at the very beginning. Starts by saying, Pamela, 36, a physically fit, accomplished professional woman, juggling career and 2 children. So I'm just going to read it and then we'll discuss and see if we can kind of relate to it at all. 2 children under age 4, is sitting at the holiday dinner table in her home, listening to her adored and adoring father regale the family with anecdotes from childhood about her and her brother, 2 years younger. He turns to her and says, "Oh, Pamela, you know you were never very good in math and geography." Only a few minutes later, she feels a sharp pain in her back. The pain is so severe that she excuses herself and goes into her kitchen to calm her reaction to the pain and to identify the emotional trigger for its sudden onset. Using the work that we, and this is meaning Pamela and Dr. Anderson, have done in psychoanalytic psychotherapy for the past year, she quickly realizes that she is furious at her father for his, quote, sexist point of view. How could he say that, knowing so well her passionate feminist leanings? Within a few minutes, the pain vanishes, and she's able to return to the dining table. Later on, Dr. Anderson writes, in Pamela's therapy, she learned to use the pain as a signal that she had experienced an emotional reaction to something that had just happened. Once she had identified and experienced anger at her father, the pain disappeared. When her psychotherapy began, she was not able to tolerate experiencing conflicting feelings towards her father. Together, we helped her learn that she can love him and feel angry at him simultaneously. So I thought that was an interesting quote, because you hear about this a lot, and I was just curious. So I mean, I guess if anyone minds me using their screen name or their first name in the in the podcast, let me know. Type it into either the chat room at www.tmswiki.org/chat or into the meeting chat in Fuse Meeting. But it's pretty darn anonymous with 6 billion people in the world. So I feel comfortable, but I want to respect other people's stuff. So in terms of the people that we have here today, I mean, Duster, I think you're pretty new, right?
Yeah, relatively.
Yeah. Okay. So you may not have
but not. I've actually I kind of fixed myself a couple years ago with this program, but I think I forgot to. I didn't stick with it. I didn't keep thinking about it afterwards, and then I had a relapse. So
yeah, I know that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I haven't had. It's funny though, because this relapse occurred while my parents were visiting me. So I was telling that story.
Yeah,
I'm trying
yeah.
to think of something that they might have said or done right before. But,
well, I think a parent visit is just huge in general. I mean, I'm going to be honest too. I'm having not a relapse, but I'm having a new symptom personally. I tend to think of TMS as something which happens throughout the lifetime, and I had for 18 years I had really significant symptoms in my hands, my thumbs, my shoulder, my neck, my back, my right knee, my vocal folds, my wrists, and my foot. And now I'm getting a new symptom in my jaw, and it's kind of weirding me out because I know that for some, I'm sorry to freak you out, Duster, but I know that for some people relapses are tough because the first time you overcome it, it's just like this joyous thing, and I think it helps to soothe you a lot, the fact that you're like, oh, you're recovering. So I can totally relate on to symptoms coming back a little bit. But yeah, and coincidentally, I'm actually at a family, visiting my family right now. So there could be a connection.
yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like Becca has put those quotes into the thing, and it looks like Morcom has joined us. Are you here, Morcom?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Glad to have you here. And let's see. So Mel, you're fairly new, right? This is your first time around, correct?
First time around, correct.
Excellent. By the way, if anybody doesn't want to chat, just type it into the chat room, and I'll respect that. Yeah. So have you tried the kind of the think physical? Like that's a kind of a core principle of this is using your symptoms to say, hey, okay, now's the time that we need to pay attention to what's going on psychologically. I mean, I guess I do this too. I think that my recovery was so easy the first time that I never actually had to do that. It kind of was that joyous thing that I mentioned earlier, where I just realized that I could do more. I read the stories. It was a very simple book here, and it just took a couple weeks, and I didn't have to do any deep work. And I almost feel like I regret not doing the deep work because I didn't learn a lot of stuff I could have learned, and now it looks like maybe I'm going to have to do some of that deep work.
The mistake I made with my recovery in 2002, although I didn't know it or wasn't aware of it, was that my psychological situation changed, and I got over my so-called herniated disc, but my psychological situation had improved a lot. A, I got money. B, I got a new social group going. I I got back to bicycling. I got back to doing all kinds of things. And I assumed that it was going to physical therapy that did it. So that programmed me that way. So when I had a relapse in 2008, I went back to physical therapy thinking that that would cure it. But so I reinforced all of these bad concepts, assumptions. And then I discovered Sarno, and then I started to undo the conditioning that I'd acquired.
So it sounds like you had, like you were thinking physically, and you overcame it, even though you were thinking physically, because some of the psychological stressors went away, but that didn't fix the fundamental problem.
No.
Yeah, that's kind of like my situation, is that I don't think that I ever fix the fundamental problem. I mean, the thing which I love about this book, Pathways, is the way that it goes into the childhood roots, and it feels like for me, I've still got some patterns of thought which are left over from childhood, and that I'm still going to need to work on those. And my hunch is that it's going to take a while. It's just sometimes one gets gut feelings, but I just think it's valuable doing it for its own benefit.
Well, from reading Mate on rheumatoid arthritis, I see a lot of parallels between people with rheumatoid conditions in general and TMS. Like the tendency to be long-suffering, and that points up certain fundamental ways of coping that you developed in childhood.
Right.
Like, in my case, defending my mother, and part of the bargain, defending my mother against my father, and part of the bargain was her defending me against him. So it reversed childhood roles. That's something that Mate goes into, going back to other people's studies, where the child is really a little grown-up man with the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Which has to be terrifying for the child, because all of a sudden, like childhood is supposed to be nice. You're supposed to be protected and sheltered from the world by your parents, and if all of a sudden you have to protect your parents, that's a scary place. And
you see, go on.
Oh, and Mate talks. Oh, I'm going to start the video conference. I forgot to do that. Morcom, but Mate talks about it in terms of boundaries, in terms of kids should have these boundaries respected, but circumstances don't allow that to, where you shouldn't have to defend your mom, but unfortunately, that's the way that life works sometimes. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I should say, for everybody who's listening, oops, I didn't mean to share my primary monitor there.
Yeah, you do your homework, that's for sure.
I do. That is a good point. But what I was going to say is that we're reading a couple of different books simultaneously. One of them is Gabor Mate's. In addition to Pathways, we're also reading Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No, which has these great insights into psychology. Yep. And we're also reading another amazing book by Steve Ozanich. Most of you have heard of this, called The Great Pain Deception. Great insights in there as well. So do you remember the story of Pamela, 36-year-old? Dad says, oh, you were never good at math and geography, and she gets pain and has to excuse herself, gets in touch with the psychological causes, and then gets better because she's able to access those and diffuse that. This quote reminded me a little bit of another quote from Dr. Sarno earlier on, where, let's see, he is, what does he say in the foreword? He talks about the childhood roots of the current rage. He says, "It should come as no surprise that the first contributor to the reservoir of rage we accumulate as we go through life is childhood. In fact, the influence of childhood emotional experiences is probably responsible for the majority of the rage as will be seen as we go along. In the first 5 or 6 years of life, we are primarily emotional beings," which I thought that was an amazing quote. I thought that simplified so much the irrationality of the id and the simplicity of the id, the naivete of the id. You know, it doesn't know, you know, all these things that our logical brains know. It's just very simple. It's just a simple.
Is this in Sherman and Anderson, or is this Sarno quoted in the beginning?
This is from the foreword.
Oh yeah, that I remember that quite well. That's a real that is what gives you a key when you read Mate, when he starts talking about early childhood experience and how formative it is in all kinds of autoimmune disorders.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you get to this point where you start developing a meta theory. Not just TMS, but then you see Alzheimer's, IBS. Many of the things that Mate says about IBS, which is a TMS equivalent, also apply to TMS. It's like a whole region of medicine that we've ignored with the scientific model, and it's obvious on the anecdotal level and our own personal experience. There's no way out of it. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah. Well, and it's one thing I like about Sarno is that he's very clear. TMS is the musculoskeletal thing. It's when the brain decreases blood flow to a specific area of your body, a specific anatomical region, whereas the equivalents, such as rheumatoid arthritis or whatever else, I'm no expert on the lists of equivalents, those are more about those may have different etiologies, but they're still mind-body conditions, still psychosomatic, still psychophysiologic conditions where your psyche is causing a physiological change in your body. It makes sense. It makes sense that if you're looking at all of these psychophysiologic disorders, TMS and its equivalents, that you would that they would have an underlying psychology based on, according to Dr. Sarno, this repressed rage.
Well, Mate talks about the cancer personality type, but it seems to run through all of the TMS equivalents. There's that long suffering. There's that taking it on your shoulders. There's blaming yourself. There's low self-esteem. There's all of these things. And then even in Alzheimer's disease, where the rats who were taken care of and petted when they're young wind up not getting degenerative diseases the way the rats who were in a deprived environment were stressed. It's like a whole ripple effect throughout a lifetime.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it does feel like there's that there is a one psychology beneath all of it. Okay, so getting back to the causes of the psychology, Sarno continues to say after about this thing about primarily emotional beings. It would, therefore, be logical that whatever reactions we have will be unrelated to reason or thought. It is essential, therefore, that the predominant feeling to be conveyed to the child be unconditional love and acceptance. So that's what we need. We need this unconditional love and acceptance. Historically, this has rarely been the case. Outright physical, sexual, or emotional abuse will give rise to monumental pain, hurt, sadness, and anger, all repressed, for children are protected from such feelings by the mind. I have found, however, that what might be called subtle emotional abuse is virtually universal in previous generations. He goes on to say, it was my personal experience. Instead of unconditional love and total acceptance, we learn to conduct ourselves within behavioral parameters set forth by our parents, either explicitly or by implication. So I just thought that was interesting, and that the Pamela story was a good example of that subtle emotional abuse. And it's I think that's probably implicated in a lot of different forms of TMS, where you're with people who, especially if it comes from your parents, where they have such a powerful role in your life that what they say can be very hurtful, like the sexist comment from Pamela's dad.
My video went off.
Oh no!
Yeah, there you're back.
Excellent.
Do I have to? Oh yeah, and I'm off again. Yeah, there I'm back. All right.
Can anyone relate to that, to the callers? We've had a couple more people connecting up. I don't know all the names because I just have a couple phone numbers. But this is very much an open group. We have, to some degree, a fairly abstract text, and what we want to do is we want to bring it down to something that people can relate to. So, do you folks see that subtle abuse in your own history, in the things which you see potentially as driving your TMS? Mel or Duster, do you see those at all?
I do, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And also myself, yes, for sure.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, and I think in the first couple sections, Dr. Anderson makes it very clear that that different things are stressful for different people. Yeah. Would anyone be willing to expand on that? Maybe give an example. I think examples really flesh things out.
I have a question.
Sure.
My name is Rick.
Rick.
This is my first. I just joined Wiki from a friend telling me about it. I've just been in this process about a week, and I'm brand new to this.
Welcome.
And so, is this also held on video as well as telephone?
Some of us will have video as well. There are multiple ways to connect. I see that you joined Fuse meeting briefly, but you don't appear to be here now.
I couldn't figure it out, so I just clicked off of it.
Don't worry about it. The video is kind of nice. You get to watch Morcom and I. I kind of like maintaining pseudo eye contact with Morcom, but it's not crucial. I think most of what you're going to get is out of the audio conversation.
And who am I talking to? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, okay. So we've got Morcom, Mel, Duster, Becca, and I am Forrest.
Okay, so you're the one that supports Wiki, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
My pleasure.
I've been a medical psychologist. I quit practice about 30 years ago, but I studied mind-body medicine. That's what my degree was in. Actually, that's how you become a medical psychologist. And nothing about this was ever covered.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, I'm probably one of the more disabled people out there from TMS right now, because I tried to use my old paradigms to maintain my life, and they didn't work.
Yeah, they don't work.
They know they don't work. They got me in deeper and deeper trouble. So I've been talking to a lady named Susan, who's been helping me get started on this, and I appreciate finding all the support that's on Wiki, and I want to thank you for doing all that. I know how hard it is to maintain that, because I've run support groups. I ran a support group on the internet for people coming off of psych drugs for 12 years, and it can be very draining at times. So anyway, thank you, Forrest, and I appreciate meeting everybody, and I hope to learn more and someday be able to get back to my athletic pursuits, which now I can hardly walk through the house or even get out of bed.
I am absolutely sure you will. I know, Duster. It sounds like you've made some progress on that. Do you mind sharing about that? Like you've made some progress recently, I think. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong. It's been slower than I wanted it to be, but that's I think it always is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I went down like right at the beginning of the year. My lower back, as we say, went out or whatever, and I couldn't walk. For the first couple of weeks of that, I couldn't walk at all, and then I started this. It took about a week or two for me to get back on board with this, even though I've gone through treatment and like read all the books and did all this a couple of years ago, and then, as I was saying earlier, I just kind of more or less forgot about it and went about my life and did everything normal, and I was just cured in my mind. And then, but I've piled up a lot of stresses that all kind of came together at one point, and it put me down, and I couldn't walk. And but I've been sticking with. I've been coming here every Saturday. I've been going through the educational program. I haven't been as, I've been doing it like every other day, and but still listening to books and taking a lot of forced advice, which and the first time I came on, Steve Ozanich was on, and he said, it's also important just to go do something that you want to do, just go enjoy yourself, and so really I've been pushing myself to just go out of the house and do things, and like just try to have fun when possible, and that's all that stuff together. I'm walking around now. I get a little numbness in my leg. It kind of shifted it went from my lower back and into basically my right butt cheek. Just feels
classic area for pain.
Tight.
If you hear a pain in the butt, that's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you want.
That's fairly typical, that lower back pain followed by sciatica moving through the leg on the affected side. It's what I get. It's what everybody seems to get. Sometimes it's in the ankle, sometimes in the knee, sometimes in the butt. Then it surprises you that it's back in the lower back again, which of course should signal to you that it's actually central nervous system rather than something physical, i.e. a herniated disc, which could never cause that kind of a set of symptoms, incidentally. Not physically possible. Something else going on.
So Mel just mentioned in the chat room, Duster, I'm having pain in the butt and some numbness in the right foot. I think a lot of people can relate to this. Dr. Sarno changed the name of the disorder from tension myositis disorder to tension myoneural disorder to communicate the idea that sometimes nerves get involved also. It is the nerves not that are pinched, but rather where the autonomic nervous system cuts off the supply of blood to them so they don't get enough oxygen, and that causes what he describes in the foreword to Pathways to Pain Relief as paresthesias. Esthesia just means feeling, and para means around. So it's weird feelings that you can have in your leg, or pain in your leg, anything which is innervated by the sciatic nerve. So very common to get pain in the sciatic region from TMS. But you said that. So Dustin, I'm really glad to hear. It sounds like getting out and being more active and finding something to love in your life has been valuable for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I still do I think all of it together is important. I still do the work. In fact, I did actually made an appointment and saw a counselor last week.
Awesome.
And I did that last time, and I found that to be very helpful. And
are you
it's funny
lucky? Keep going. Sorry.
I'll say it's funny because I felt this way the last time I sought therapy, but it's like I just go and I just end up talking to them, and I go, well, gosh, I could probably, why can't I just sit home and talk to myself and not pay someone? But for some reason, like I keep talking longer when there's somebody there listening or something, and I'm
absolutely,
because I went through a scenario that I've gone through in my head, a dozen times or more. But when I was telling him about it, I found a realization that I hadn't found before, and that just I don't know. It's that I find that all that stuff to be helpful, but I think the biggest thing for me was the biggest leap I took was probably about 3 weeks in. I just got tired of being homebound, and I walked. My girlfriend has a workshop like about 20 blocks away, and I just decided I was going to walk there, and it hurt.
That can be great.
And it hurt. And halfway through, even I called her and I said, I don't think I can make it. I think you need to come pick me up. And she's like, I think you can make it. And,
all right.
And so I kept going, and I did. And you know what? I didn't feel better during that walk at all. But it made me realize that it was just some pain. I was going to have pain anyway. I might as well get up and do things because I know it's not. It helped me not to be afraid of it and not to go do stuff. And
exactly.
That was the biggest step for me.
A milestone.
Yeah.
That you can exceed next time.
Yeah. Well, and the purpose of the pain is to distract you, and you didn't let it distract you. You said, whatever, the pain is going to be here. It's going to take a little while to recover. It always takes long. Well, it often takes longer than we want, and it's different for different people. And so I'm just going to live life.
Yeah. The hardest thing for me is that when I was going through this a couple of years ago, I had a day after about 6 months of constant pain and about 3 of those not being able to walk hardly at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like during the middle of that time, I got into reading Sarno and some other books, and there was one day where I just came up with, I somehow mustered all the resolve I could, and I got so upset about the condition I was in, and about all of the things that I had unearthed reading these books, and I totally broke down, and I cried and screamed, and then that wore me out, and I fell asleep, and I woke up 2 hours later, and I was absolutely fine.
That's awesome. That's great.
I walked like 150 blocks that day. I went out and had a good time, hung out with friends, had a great day, went home, went to bed, woke up the next day, and felt pretty good. And then the next day after that, I was right back where I started. And it was, but having that one instant turnaround makes it harder when it takes 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But after that, it took after I got worse again, after that 1 or 2 days, it took another 3 or 4 weeks with counseling and work. But
it takes a while. But you know what I've learned about TMS? You can get angry at it taking a while, and that'll rev you up and make it take even longer. But that's okay. The TMS is going to be patient. It'll stick with you for as long as it takes. So sometimes you just got to settle in and say, maybe this will take a little while, and I'm gonna do it. Or not that I'm gonna do it, because that puts pressure on you. It revs you up even more. But here I am in my life, and I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to enjoy my life. Thank you for your insight. That was and thank you very much for your willingness to share there. That's good. I think it helps. It helps all of us to hear stories like that.
Exactly. That's what really seems to help with these conferences and chats. Hearing other people's stories gives you a perspective on your own situation.
I could not agree more.
I think I said this last week, but every Saturday I come here, and every Sunday is the best day of the week for my body.
Yeah.
I feel most functional after these.
I concur. I noticed that too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining, because it's people coming in and sharing their stories that makes the difference. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Thanks for being there for joining.
Yeah. My pleasure. Can anyone else relate to that? This idea of soothing yourself, and we have a little bit of calendar watching in there about how concern about how long it takes slows us down, and kind of hope.
I think a key part of Dr. Schubiner's meditation exercises involves being kind to the different portions of your body as you project your consciousness into them. And that seems to have a very beneficial effect. And then the affirmations at the end, liking your whole body and mind, as if you've come to that realization through the meditative exercise, by going through your feet, your thighs, your butt, your stomach, your shoulders.
Kind of like a Buddhist loving-kindness meditation.
Yeah, he does. Schubiner does mix some concepts of Mahayana Buddhism into that, instantaneous, short-term, dynamic psychotherapy model.
Yeah.
But that's not beyond the imagination, because Buddha was working along those same lines with compassion for yourself and healing.
Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't have to be a religious thing either. I think that's an important distinction to bear in mind.
Yes.
I know Steve O is very religious Christian, but he also believes, and I know that he likes Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk writer, a lot for the kind of the psychological wisdom in it. At least that's my interpretation. I really can't speak for him, and I want to emphasize that. Can't emphasize that enough. But that's my interpretation. That's really interesting. The whole thing about soothing, I think, is something that I actually took from the chapter that we were going over from Pathways. Dr. Anderson writes, in treating pain, it is crucial to learn as much as possible about the individual's early experiences of being soothed. Did they have early experiences of being in acute pain or chronic pain? What type of soothing was available? We now know from the research on premature infants that a child who has been through a medical illness that requires multiple injections and presumably other painful stuff, and medical treatments will be more sensitive to painful sensations later on in life. So I thought that was an interesting quote about, and the story that Duster was sharing about, it sounds like there was a cathartic experience of getting all of that emotion out, and that soothed him. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And then also coming weekly to the chat rooms and sharing and hearing other people's stories does the same thing. An important thing of soothing. It reminded me of a quote from Dr. Sarno. This is from Mind Body Prescription in a section called The Sources of Rage. He talks about, quote, the rage-soothe ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Sarno says, I believe a kind of rage-soothe ratio may play a role in determining when physical symptoms will occur. So obviously, Pamela, her rage went up. Patients frequently ask, why did the pain start now? Invariably, I reply, because your rage has reached a critical level, because it now threatens to erupt into consciousness. But then he continues. He says, suppose, however, there is another element in the equation, that it is not simply the quantity of rage that brings on the symptoms, but the presence or absence of counterbalancing soothing factors. Theoretically, these pleasant elements in a person's life would modify the threat posed by the rage and make the symptoms unnecessary. One can carry this to the point of absurdity, but I believe something like it goes on, and that the occurrence of symptoms reflects too much rage and not enough counteracting soothing elements in my life. And it feels like, when we get out and we do those activities, that's fixing the rage-soothe ratio. Another book that we're reading is Steve Ozanich's Great Pain Deception. And I'll have to go back and look, it's maybe in chapter 4 or 5, where in the healing chapter, at first, maybe someone else can help me with this, but I think he gets really angry. And he says, I'm just going to hit golf balls and hit the golf balls and hit the golf balls. And that's important, right? Like, that helps a lot of people. But it also revs you up. And the point is to soothe yourself as well, to develop, Dr. Anderson is talking about developing skills for soothing oneself. And that's, I know in my own experience with my jaw, that when my symptoms in my jaw, these new symptoms, start flaring up, I say, okay, what's going on? I need to develop a way to soothe myself. I need to calm myself down. Last session, so that helps for me.
Yeah, I find that helps too. I mean, I noticed recently I started listening to a lot of, I used to always listen to a lot of Eckhart Tolle and Thich Nhat Hanh, but I started listening again to some of Eckhart Tolle's stuff, and not even paying that much attention, because I've heard him, the books I have on audio I've heard a few times, but like just his voices.
Yeah, it's so calming.
just things like that I just, it's not even necessarily, sure, sometimes I focus on like doing meditative things where I'm actively soothing myself or parts of my subconscious, if I can find them or whatever, but just listening to that sound, or even putting on a golf game, I find very relaxing. Just
putting on a what? I'm sorry.
Kind of, if there's golf on television.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I think that soothing element is something I hadn't really. I mean, it's something I've been doing, and it's been helpful, but I hadn't really processed it as being a soothing thing. I just was like, well, I just need to relax. And
what I noticed with my massive back attack in 2001, following the death of my mother, was that she had always functioned as a soother. So while I was it wasn't just the grief of the loss, it was the fact that I lost someone to counterbalance all of the stress I was putting on myself. I was getting approval when I fixed up the house. Even in her dotage, she would say, "Oh, good boy." And I didn't realize how much that was allowing me to work 2 jobs, manage all these lawsuits, take care of her. I was always getting the mother-son soothing from her. And when I lost that, it took about 6 months for the biochemistry to change. There was a delay, of course, and she wasn't there anymore.
Calm after the storm idea.
Yeah, that same thing. That I was thinking of that when I read those words of Dr. Sarno about the soothe stressor ratio. I said, aha, that's how it works. If you have one person in your life who's stroking your brow, you can walk through hell. But you take away that one soothing element.
Yeah.
Or then you aren't just walking through hell. You're there.
Yeah. It was interesting to what you said about how you weren't conscious about how important that was to you. I think that goes to my own experience also. My mother died when I was young, and I think I tended not to grieve that. I'm sure it's a source of my own TMS, but I didn't grieve it that much when I was at that age. I think because I didn't know how important it was. I didn't know how much it was going to hurt. I just kind of took it for granted, and then it's only later on when you realize, when you're just in pain and you're like, wait a second, why am I in pain? Why am I not being soothed? That you, and then it takes a while to figure out, okay, what went wrong here? Where is this pain coming from? Where is this rage coming from? Why does my jaw hurt?
When you first read that quote, I thought you were going in a slightly different direction. Does he say something about looking at the way that you were soothed as a child in terms of like whether that ratio was sufficient as a child, and like whether insufficient soothing in childhood leads to more anger?
So I was probably a little bit confusing. I was actually integrating two sources. I was integrating from the chapters that we from this week's chapters from Pathways. Dr. Sherman talks about in doing psychotherapy, it's important to learn about the patient's early experiences of being soothed, so that you can form a complete picture. And were they soothed or were they scared when they were younger? And if they were born prematurely and they had lots of needles sticking into them, they were probably revved up and they learned that the world was a scary place, and maybe they didn't get the soothing that they needed. And then I moved on to Dr. Sarno, who talked about the rage-soothe ratio.
Okay. Well, yeah, I only asked because like when you first started talking about it, the first thought that I had was like when I was a kid and I broke my leg, and my parents didn't believe me, so I had a broken leg for like 3 days. And
oh my God!
They wouldn't take me to the doctor because they didn't believe that it was broken.
Ouch.
So I was thinking of it as like, oh, maybe that's something I hadn't thought of this whole time. But then when you're talking about the childhood soothing to pain ratio, I was like, oh, maybe that's something that is still making me mad.
Yeah.
I'm sure they felt horrible once they found out that it actually was broken. But,
right.
But it was more like, what the hell were you doing? That was so stupid. If it's not broken, you can, just like I had done something wrong, and I should just get over it and stop crying. And
that must have been so tough. Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I'm glad for whatever. I'm glad that I thought of that when you. I don't know if that's what he meant, but that's what I got from that. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. That's I hear you on that. This may actually be a good time to wrap up. In the chat room, we have a couple people showing up. I just want to say I really enjoyed our discussion. I really enjoyed everyone sharing their own experiences. I think this is going to be pretty cool, and I am looking forward to future talks. The book is super, super short, and I think that the best parts are by far the parts later on. So I'm going to propose that we jump right in, and Morkan, what do you think about this? Maybe we do all of the Eric Sherman sections for next week. Maybe we can spend 2 weeks on it. We can decide if we want to spend another week on it, but we can at least start doing some of those awesome Eric Sherman sections. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'll read that. I'm at about 27%.
Okay.
I've been
Duster, do you think you're going to do the reading? I mean, it's totally up to you. If you just want to hang out and chat, I thought it was terrific to have you along today. If you don't want to buy the book, don't buy the book. But I do have a copy I can lend out to you.
If you could lend it to me, I would probably read it.
I will totally do that then.
Okay.
I think it's only available in Kindle right now.
Yeah, no, and you're allowed to lend it out once for a period of 4 weeks.
Oh, I see.
And I actually had 2 copies, so I can lend it to 2 people. So Duster gets 1 copy. If he can send me his email address in chat or send me an email, forrest@tmswiki.org, then I'll totally send him a copy. All I need is your email address, and somehow Amazon makes it work.
You're forrest@tmswiki.org?
Yep.
Okay. Although the only thing is I'm not sure if I'll be able to be here next Saturday, but I still want to read it.
Yeah.
But.
Yep.
There's just one more thing I'd like to get in from the Anderson Sherman on location 682. They mention significantly many people report that the emotional distress they experience as the pain symptomology improves is more unbearable than the physical pain which initially brought them into treatment. That sounds to be borne out over and over again in the TMS forum, where these people are making improvements, and then all of a sudden they have this anxiety and depression that they're grappling with. It's that one statement is full of so much wisdom about the way this proceeds. And that's also part of the strategy of TMS too, isn't it? When you don't want to articulate it, you don't want to face it, then you'll have something else. Anxiety, depression, a funny feeling in your head, a cold. I'm sure my cold that I had began on the same day my mother died, January 26th. And I looked back at that and I said, that my autoimmune system must have been affected, because this cold was just so strange. It wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it just kind of lingered on. And then I looked at the chronology, and I said, this is the TMS as a cold as I improved. But let's go on to the forum.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay.
Always learning something here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Making connections. Okay, let's get over there to the forum then.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are wrapping up. It's at 3:01. Let's go to www.tmswiki.org/chat. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We will do we'll start discussing all of the Eric Sherman sections next week. As always, you can talk about whatever you want, but I will prepare a couple quotes and stuff like that I think are interesting about Sherman, and hopefully we'll have a great discussion like this one. See you next week.
Thanks, Forrest.
Thank you for joining us, Mel.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.